Hello, I'm Joshua Kitts, the director of the Composed Dream Game RPG Marketplace, and today we're going to take a closer look at Aegean, a role-playing game of Greek city-states and the heroes and demigods that defend them. There's a fair bit of interest from the gods themselves in your life and what you're doing. We're going to talk very, very briefly about the Book of Heroes. We carry that, and the Book of Empires, a GM screen, some dice, all on the Composed Dream Game RPG Marketplace, both in Canada and the UK. There is also currently a Kickstarter for the Isle of Pelops, another book of about this size with an adventure and details for a bunch of locations on that area, which would be places like Sparta and so on, and those surrounding areas where Hercules comes from. So there is a mashup in Aegean of all the classic kind of later period historical events that we think about and all of the kind of heroic legendary things happening at the same time. So it's a pastiche of all of that happening at the same time. We're going to take a deeper look. Alright, so right off the top, who is Aegean for? If you love Greek history and Greek mythology, Aegean is for you. If you like D10 dice pool systems a la Vampire the Masquerade and World of Darkness, then Aegean is probably for you. Aegean is also a medium-weight GM'd game, so if you prefer, say, story games and super light narrative games, not for you. If you prefer really crunchy games, it might not be quite enough for you, but there is a fair bit going on, and we'll get into that. What is when I talk about a D10 dice pool system, what's going on there? Well, it is very much like the system used in Vampire the Requiem. This isn't the new World of Darkness engine, or your base World of Darkness engine. So you add a characteristic in this, plus a skill. So you might have a characteristic of Might 2 and a skill of 3 Brawl, and you roll 5d10s. An 8, 9, or a 10 all generate a success. Multiple successes sort of compound, so they can do extra or earn you extra. And 10s have some special sauce to them. So they don't give you an extra success or a reroll like some of the World of Darkness games. Instead, they let you make a few different choices. You can bank resolve, and you can spend resolve later to do one of the other things. Say you were doing an awareness test or something like that, you can give a success to another player. So if it narratively makes sense that, hey, I could be maybe defending this person, or I alerted them, so they're alerted when they would have failed otherwise, suddenly one of your fellow players isn't being ambushed. You have succeeded. You can remove one risk. Risk is sort of like temporary damage. You get up to your endurance threshold in risk, and then you take real wounds that take a lot of time to heal. The only time you can heal is in downtime, and downtime is important for your city building aspect of the game and your city growth aspect of the game, which we'll get into later. And you can also invoke the fates. Invoking the fates is a big part of the game, and that can be related to a lot of different things. So invoking the fates could just be you have the favor of one of the gods, you get an extra success, or you succeed because you have invoked the fates. The special attributes of your weapons also require you to invoke the fates. And similarly, I think a decent amount of the sort of magical type elements might also involve invoking the fates. But I would want to read that a little closer. The magic has a kind of more lighter touch. It's more that legendary aspect to things, like you can perform oracles and things to see the future. And there are other things as well. So Aegean does a good job. I'll show off the book quickly. You might see that and go, the font is a little small. It is a little small. I spent quite a bit of time reading through this, and it is a very clear and easy on the eye font, and there's a fair bit of white space, so I didn't have any trouble with it, despite when I first looked at it going, oh, that's a bit of a small font. All the hardcovers have a bookmark, and what is covered in this book, and then I'll touch briefly on what's covered in this book, and I think I'll wrap up with kind of the city mechanics and a few things like that. Maybe a bit more about how your characters work. So, this book we've got kind of an overview of the system, your characteristics, your skills, your attributes. So there's 5 characteristics, so those are kind of like your primary base things for your roles, and there's like 15 skills. And then attributes are like your combined things. So these are things like glory, which is very important, and hubris, which is going to be sort of about if your hubris outpaces your glory, then the gods start punishing you, and that's an important part of play. And you might get cursed, all sorts of fun stuff. We've got character creation, so you pick a concept. Heritage, you might be a demigod or a mortal. Mortal gives you more points to probably take more careers. And then you can just buy up skills and grab some equipment that makes sense. Careers are things like athlete, merchant, citizen, scholar, wrestler. We've got a section on wealth and equipment. We've got some GM sections, good coverage on sort of all the areas around the Aegean Sea. And in summary, and it actually stats up the cities, or a number of the cities, like you'd stat out your starting city, which I'll talk about briefly now. So, your starting city, your city you create together as the players at the beginning of the campaign. That's the idea. And it has this nice method of tying the whole campaign together. You can go off on missions, you come back. So there's always an adventure phase or a mission phase. And then you generally are coming back to the city, you have downtime, you grow your city. You might be stuck away and have to take downtime, and then the only time you can really heal from serious wounds is during downtime, so during this kind of city phase. So you build your city together. Your city has certain characteristics too, like military, culture, and a few others. And those are primarily grown from building new buildings, so constructing new works. And you're keeping track of a few attributes of your city. So how much money does your city have? How much starter? What's the population of the city? What's your food? And so on. So during your downtime, you can start building projects to build new constructions. You can try to negotiate for trade routes with other cities. You can try to improve your relations with other cities. And those can also feature into what you end up doing on your kind of mission adventure phase, or it can feed into it. There's also always an event that you're rolling on. If the risk for your city is higher, the bad events will be worse, and your city takes risk from events and so on that are happening in those downtime as well, or choices that you might have made while you're growing your city. You can be elected as a character to an office that corresponds to any of those 5 characteristics. So you might be the military officer for that downtime phase, that year. We'll say year. It doesn't ever actually specify how long this sort of phase takes, or what time it represents in Aegean, so it can be sort of loose. But I sort of like to think of it as a year going by, personally. So the subsystem for the cities, can you ignore it? Absolutely, you don't have to play with that subsystem. I think it adds a lot, and it could be a neat way of maintaining an ongoing campaign. So I'll touch briefly on what is in the Book of Heroes. The Book of Empires, which I don't have, talks about Crete and Troy and I think 2 others. If I find that, I'll try to put that on the I'll check after I'm done the video, and I'll put that on here. And there's, I believe, an adventure for each of those as well. So the Book of Heroes covers the underworld in a fair bit of depth, and the chthonic beings that live there, so Hades, Persephone, some other gods and goddesses that live there. And then there's an adventure, and then we sort of have a section for various mythic quests that you can go on, and it covers the gods again in a bit. The gods are also covered in Aegean itself a fair bit, but this kind of goes into more detail on some of them, particularly the ones that are featured in the quests. And then there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 quests out besides just the Hades ones or missions that you could use in your game, leverage in your game, etc. So that's the Book of Heroes. So, I hope that has piqued your interest in Aegean. There are links to where you can get it on Composed Dream Games RPG Marketplace below. There are links on the Kickstarter for the island of Pelops. I hope I'm pronouncing that mostly right. There's probably something in here I've pronounced horribly. If you are a fan of ancients, but you're more kind of interested in the military side, get that Book of Empires. If you're more interested a little bit more in as your first supplement, start with the core book, of course. Start with the Book of Heroes as your supplement if you're more into the mythology. If you're more into the military aspect and you're looking for a different game, maybe check out Centurion, Legionaries of Rome from the Composed Dream Games Marketplace. If you're more interested in mythology, maybe check out The Children of Eru, which uses runes and has Celtic and Viking mythology in it, mostly centered around Ireland. If you like dice pools, maybe check out Simple Superheroes, which I wrote and designed. That's an opposed dice pool system. We Evolve has done a few different titles as well. Stoo Goff wrote The Gaslight Club, which is a Year Zero engine, 1920s. There are secretly androids. We Evolve's newest title is A Show of Hands. This is quite silly. You're all more of a one-shot. You're all basically disembodied hands from a circus, and everything is resolved by doing things with just your hand. And also Wild is wake-initiated lucid dreaming. There's a long video about that. There's a long video about Wild and a good one on Centurion on this channel if you want to check that out. Alright, so, like I said, I hope that's piqued your interest in Aegean, and you give it a look, and maybe support the Kickstarter, maybe pick it up from the marketplace. As always, good gaming, everybody. Cheers.